my goodness! Holy sh!
I've gotten back to doing a little bit of work on the mower here. So anyway, I dismounted the emergency spares that I bought just because I wanted to use basically the 17-inch center. Then I split the rim. This is the 19-inch Model A wheel. It fits fairly nicely inside it, like so. There's a little bit of slop. But I'm wanting to get the center out further. So what I'm going to do, I got a flat spot there in the concrete part of my shop. It's the flattest part I've found. What I will do is flip it over, set it like that. That gives me about another, maybe not quite half an inch. As you can see, there's a gap all the way around, which shouldn't be a problem. I can fill that with weld. I'm not going to do the whole thing. I'll just do a couple inches, couple inches, couple inches, couple inches. It'll be fine. And the reason I want to get all my dish on this side is to keep my scrub radius as little as possible. And yeah, you want to keep your scrub radius to a minimum, especially on something like this where you're actually manually doing the steering, because obviously there's no power steering on this. Another thing about pushing it out, you see it, well there, it really kind of fits, but once I push it out, it'll be about like that. So before I do anything else, I'm going to cut this off right here, because it will be serving no purpose. So I just will get rid of some of that weight. And then also, I made this jig. I had some Chrysler wheels that were like this. They just had the round holes in them, and I kind of wanted to give them a little more style, give them kind of a spoked look. And what I did was I made this jig the wrong way. And I set the jig on each hole, and it gave me a pattern to use my plasma cutter to just, and it gave the wheel kind of a little more of a spoked appearance. So I think it really made them look a lot better. And it should work for this one too. It looks like it fits pretty well. Okay, so there it is. Got the old outer lip trimmed off, and here's what I was talking about before. Here's the original round hole pattern, and here's what I'm doing to it. Yeah, they're a little jagged. I'll clean them up a little with the die grinder. But yeah, I think that looks a whole lot better than the round stuff. Plus it, I don't know, might shed a pound or two, as long as getting that ring off of there. Might make a difference. All that couple extra pounds of weight when it rolls over on me backwards might make the difference between paralyzing me or killing me. Okay, here's the spot on the floor that years ago I determined was the most level in the garage. As you can see, I have some pieces of metal spacing the center out inside the outer rim. And boy, that gap sure looks a lot bigger now. But I'm going to fill it anyway. I guess I could find something to bridge the gap, but yeah, that'll be fine. I don't want to add any more weight to it anyway. Worked out pretty good. Got 3 heavy tacks in place. Here's a finished welded wheel. I know you can't see the back side, but here's how it looks from the front. Pan out a little bit. Not my most fabulous work, but for an off-roading mower, it's going to be just fine. I went ahead and put a weld at each one of these spokes, which I think there's 12 of them. It's plenty strong for a mower. I don't know that I'd go pulling that nonsense of putting this on a car, but I guess if I was going to try that, I'd go ahead and weld the rest of it up. Running pretty true enough for an off-road slow speed off-road vehicle. Okay, so here's what I got going on at the front end currently. I know I did show you some trailer spindles and hubs that I'd bought from Surplus Center, but I've changed my direction. These are early model Ranger Bronco 2 front hubs and spindles, like 83 to 89, I believe. I was just kind of kicking around the idea of using these before I ever ordered the trailer spindles, and then once the spindles got here and I got to looking at them, and they were plenty heavy duty, but actually getting them fabricated into a steering knuckle was going to present some problems that I thought really weren't going to be strong enough for the abuse that it might take. So then I went ahead and seriously looked into these early Ranger stuff. These are four-wheel drive stuff. The thing I like about it, okay, let's talk about what I've done first. This is the stock Ranger hub and rotor, and this is what I managed to cut it down to. This is the spindle, stock one, and that's what I've cut it down to. Basically, the only thing I've done to the spindle is I ground that index flange off of it that indexes it into the steering knuckle. But the reason I did that, and the reason that this spindle is going to work so much better for me, taking that flange or lip off or whatever allows me to tuck it in tighter to the steering beam or front axle, whatever you want to call it. And this nice big round flat area gives me lots of mounting options for the tabs, for getting it, mounted on the knuckle, for the steering, and plus I've got all this area back here for mounting a steering arm onto as well. So it's going to make for a lot stronger setup. Weight-wise, between these and the trailer spindles, it's pretty close. I didn't throw them on a scale. But just picking them up in your hand, they were pretty damn close. So I don't feel there's going to be enough of a weight penalty to make a difference. And when I'm talking about weight, I'm talking about the ones here that have been cut down, not that one. My scrub radius is going to be just about perfect, near as I can tell by eyeballing it. And for you, those of you that don't know, scrub radius is the axis of your steering. A perfect scrub radius, where this line goes and where your tire meets the ground, this should intersect with the center of the tire. And it's going to be, I can't show you, I don't have enough hands, but it's going to be just about perfect. And the closer you can get to perfect scrub radius, the easier your steering is going to be. So that was a big priority to me. One of the truly bad things about this setup, it's got wheel bearings, which is a good thing, but because of the front wheels that I'm using, which you've already seen, there will be no room to put some sort of a dust cap over that. So that bearing, just running it like that with no dust cap, obviously is going to expose it to contaminants, rain, mud, any other debris. And like I said, there's just the diameter of that bearing area versus the diameter of this hole in the wheel. There's just no room in there to run some sort of a cap. Now I could cut this out and make it bigger, and it might come to that, but I think initially what I'm going to try to do is either find or build something to make my own cap and weld it to this center. And then when I mount the tire and wheel on, I'll either make up some sort of a rubber gasket, or failing that, I might just give it a bead of silicone RTV and slap it on there and seal it up that way. See how that works. If that doesn't work out, then I'll cut the center of that out and come up with some sort of a proper cap. Another thing I'll have to do to seal it up, obviously the back side of this I'll have to weld some sort of a plug in there, just a little sheet metal plug, just obviously to keep mud, water, and debris from coming in and contaminating the wheel bearings by coming in through the spindle, the back side of the spindle. I'll get busy here showing you what steps I did to get these things cut down. Okay, so the first step you do, or what I did in cutting this down, obviously I took the wheel studs out, take a caliper, figure out how deep that hole is. Then flip it up, and you can see the marks I made. Just a rough idea. What that's telling you is I'll be taking a grinder with a cutting wheel and cutting it right through here. Because yeah, basically I just need the center, I don't need the actual brake rotor part of it. Alright, see if I can hold this up here and show you what I've done. I've cut all the way around it, but see, like I said before, it won't come off because of all these ribs. You can see where the grinder's cut through. So yeah, I'll have to go in here and cut diagonally. Let me see if I can cut diagonally across these ribs. Okay, they are cut, and as you can tell, they're not cut quite all the way through. And I got this thing zoomed in too far. That's pretty good. As you can tell, they're not cut all the way through, and you have to kind of pick what kind of angle you can grind it at. So you want to see where you can get your grinder wheel in there as far as necessary, which pretty much means you got to try to tuck it into these two corners here on each rib. And at a slight angle, that allows you to get in there and cut it almost all the way. Okay, so as you can see, where I didn't get cut through all the way, what I did to remedy that was I came in here on the concrete floor and dropped it several times on the floor to get it to break away. And the very first one I did, the whole thing broke quite nice and even like that. This one started coming apart in chunks before the center finally broke out. Unfortunately, because I'm a stupid head, I didn't have my camera set right and it wasn't recording to see that, which is too bad because it was, I don't know, kind of interesting watching that rotor break apart and wondering if that center was ever going to come out of there, but there it is. Let's compare it to the one I've got done. As you can see, the finished one has a smaller diameter. I do have a crappy little lathe over here that I turned it down with just to get rid of some weight. And once I get this one turned down, as you can see, I turned it down to just slightly bigger than the head on the back side of the wheel stud. But after I get it turned down, I go through and I grind all those extra ribs off. I suppose you could leave the ribs there for strength and for her pleasure, but I went ahead and I figured lighten it up as much as possible. No heavier than these mower front ends are. I'm thinking it should be strong enough without the ribs, but time will tell. Okay, so I did have to take the ribs off before I put it in the lathe. A couple of them still had enough left on them that they were going to get in the way of me and be able to cut that flange down. I'm 2 cuts into it. Seems like this lathe is so crappy. Unless I'm cutting aluminum, I really need to take small bites, about 1/8 of an inch at a time. As you can see, I'm taking quite a bit off. So yeah, it gets rid of quite a bit of weight. All right, got her all turned down. Only took slightly longer than forever. I'm going to take a few minutes and clean up all these, what's left over of these ribs. All done. I'm going to move on to the spindle. First I'm going to use is take my cutting wheel, cut it about right there, get that lip off of there. Now I use the big fella here to really take off what's left. Okay, got everything scrubbed up in a nice bath of gasoline. Got the bearing races pressed into the hubs and the wheel studs back in. I did find with this spindle, where'd it go? It had some boogered up threads on it. Why are you not focusing? I've run into this before with spindles, and I've got this thing that it's got various different pitches of threads on each end. I don't know what it's technically called, a thread file. I don't know. Man, I found this thing in a truck years ago that I bought for parts, and this has been almost an invaluable find. I've used this thing so many times to save spindles and the other things with threads in them. All right now I'm roughing out what's going to be the bottom tabs for my steering knuckle. It will look, get you a rough idea here. I need to make a tab to attach to that Ranger spindle. I'm going to drill a 3/4 inch hole in it, weld it to the bottom of the spindle, and that will make the bottom tab. Got it all marked out. I'm going to drill out the 3/4 inch hole. This was a little tricky. Obviously I've got this beam sitting in here, sitting fairly level using a bubble level. You want this to be 90 degrees here in relation to the beam. It's being a little tricky. As you can see, the bottom tab, the axle's turned upside down. The bottom tab, I just have it tack welded on there now, and it's fairly much at 90 degrees. This is the tab for the upper, and this is a tab for the lower. The tabs are the same size, 2x2, but where the hole is drilled in, it makes a difference, because obviously at the top, like I said, this is upside down. At the top, you've got a lot bigger gap than at the bottom. This side's looking pretty good, I think. I got this magnetic bubble level on there, and it's looking pretty good. I can move it to the other side, and looks pretty decent. As you might have noticed, the top tab, I went ahead and rounded that all off because I hate jagged square edges. The bottom tab, I've rounded one side off, and that's the front. On the back side, I'm going to leave this on here because I don't know yet. I might be tying into that for my steering arm, so the more meat there, the better. If I don't end up using it, I can pull it off and then go ahead and smooth that out. First test fit. Obviously, I am going to have to widen out that axle. Otherwise, it won't take very much steering before that tire gets into the frame. Let's see here if I can... Yeah, that's not very much. Not surprising though. Another thing I had to do that I didn't record, but the first initial spindle that I made, I had the mounting tab down here as low as possible on the spindle, and that didn't work out due to some miscalculation error on my part. I had to cut them off and move them back to the top of the spindle as far as possible to get the thing to sitting level. And it is sitting level. I wouldn't argue with someone that said it looked a little goofy. It kind of does, but like I said, I'm trying to use what I got around here. Another thing I got going on that I went and bought a 2,500 pound winch for it. And then this little alternator, I just got that at a swap meet a couple days ago. But I think I'm probably not going to put that on initially. I'll go without it first, just to simplify the build for now. Well, it's been another couple of days. I didn't get to work on this thing nearly as much as I wanted to the past couple of days. Out here tonight, I think I left off with I just installed it's not a permanent installation, just a trial fit of the knuckles and spindles. Last time I was out here, I stood on the frame here, 1 foot on each side, and shifted my weight back and forth, and this whole frame was just, so I figure I'd probably better concentrate on getting some structural integrity put back in the back here after stretching it and lifting it. Got the seat bracket and fender bracket bolted on there. That actually did add a surprising amount of rigidity. I've already went ahead and got my shifter for my low range, high and low range put back on. I've got these support brackets for the transaxle made up. I just got to throw some beads of weld on it, and after that I'm going to get my brake rod extended and put in there, 10 inches. And this is the original Craftsman, I don't know what you'd call it, drawbar, hitch, whatever, went on the back of the frame. I think what I'm going to do, I'm going to trim it right along here and make it fit this, and I'm just going to weld it on. I'm hoping I won't regret that later, having it put on there permanently. Someday I'll need to get in there and work on something. It'll be right in my way, but I think that's going to add a lot of rigidity back to the frame. Got the waste oil heater going, so I'm going to get active here. Okay, she's all welded up. That did a lot for the making the frame more rigid back here. I can still stand on the front and rock back and forth, and I can watch. It's firm back here, but I can watch the entire rest of the frame flexing a little bit. I think I mentioned it earlier in my first video that I was contemplating not running a hood at all and just running some tubing around the engine. And I decided I am going to do that, so I'm hoping that'll help firm up the frame in the front and the middle. I'm going to go ahead and tear all this off. I started doing that, and then I decided I better keep that on there while I welded the back hitch, plate, whatever you want to call it, because this stuff here might be helping hold the frame straight. So I thought I'd better weld the back plate on first. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove all of this, and I'm going to get the steering gear out of there. Let's see. I've mentioned it before, there's a tooth broken on one of the gears. It looks to me like these are kind of known in the, from what I gather anyway, these are kind of known in the off-road mower world as having shitty steering, and I can see why. And I don't think it's so much the, it's not the strength of the gears themselves, it's this structure here that supports the gears, this plastic, whatever you want to call it, because this bolt here is what holds the large gear down there, and as you can see, it's very sloppy. So yeah, if those gears aren't being held straight, they're not going to mesh correctly, and that's probably what broke the tooth off. It got in a bind, and somebody muscled it and just broke the tooth. I'm going to go ahead and take all this out. I'm going to actually use the gears, but I'm going to come up with another support structure for all this. I'm thinking I'm going to use some of those bearings with the little flanges that you bolt in place, and then I'll make another for this shaft. I'll probably make an entire new shaft for that, and when I get the tube structure done, I'll bring another support clear up here. So it's going to take this floppy support out of there altogether. It's all out of there. Let me show you what I found. These teeth are actually pretty good. Here's the problem. Right there. That tooth is broke off. I think what was going on, there's a couple others in there that are a little bit boogered up. I don't know where there's another one of these at around here for parts, so I'm going to try to work with what I got. I'm going to see if I can show you what's going on here. This gear, I think, in my theory, is it bound up because, as I already showed you, there was just a plastic block and a bolt in there that supported this whole thing. Let's just call it a rack for lack of a better. I was already talking about putting a bearing in here and there. I'm not sure that's going to work. This isn't too bad. I think the problem, like I said, was that plastic block was letting this gear rock like this. My plan is to drill the hole out in this to 3/4, and I might just go ahead and try to run that there, grease it up real good, and then the 3/4 shaft that I'll run through it, I'll make another support for it up here high enough to where it doesn't interfere with getting a belt on and off. And I think that'll keep it from rocking in there. I shouldn't need to put a bearing in there because it's actually not too bad. I think with a layer of thick grease in there, that'll really tighten that up. It just needs more support than that damn plastic block and a 1/2-inch bolt could do. And I will put a bearing in here. One of the reasons I'm not going to put a bearing in here is because there would not be room for the bolt heads to fit between that gear and that pan. I guess I could weld the bearing flange on there, but I kind of hate to do that, so I'm just going to depend on that nub sticking through there, fitting in that flange on the pan. A nice benefit to this is this sleeve. This is the plastic block that supported that, like so. This sleeve that came out of there, that is a bonus. I was looking for something like that earlier today to use on my steering. Well, not on the steering here, but on the rod ends that I'm going to use for the steering. We'll get into that later, but I was real happy to find that. I'm not sure what kind of material this is, if it's even weldable or not. That might be the biggest determining factor. I'm going to go ahead and try to weld this. If I can't get it welded, I'm going to have to do something else completely. Okay, I tried to weld it, just as I suspected. It's some kind of cast, and it did not weld very well at all. So I'm officially pulling the plug on trying to use any of this. Unless I find another one of these mowers with a good gear on it, I guess I'm going to try to find a whole different setup. So I'm getting impatient here. Sitting out here in the shop, measuring and thinking and considering this and that, and I finally decided I'm just going to do something. The pivot point, I decided to move it back flush with the frame. I trimmed it off. Well, get up here where I see. I trimmed it off here and got it clamped in place. I'm going to get some spacers made up to take this up, and I'm going to weld it all in place. The spacers I'm going to make, I'm cutting out of the leftover plate from the rear hitch. Nothing goes to waste around here. All welded up. Hope I don't regret welding that in place. Like I said, I was getting sick of just sitting here thinking and measuring. I felt it was time for action. That's about all I can do for tonight. Seeing as how I don't have steering gear components to work with, I think my next action is going to be widening out the front axle. Where'd it go? Oh, there it is. I've got a couple ideas. I don't know whether I want to widen it in the middle or on each side. And I'll have to get out tomorrow afternoon in the daylight and dig around the snow, see what I got for steel. It's 2 days later, and I have decided, instead of splicing into the front axle somewhere, I'm just going to make a new one. I'm going to take the pivots out, make a new one out of some 1/4-inch steel I got. This, don't you love it when you find free steel? This was sitting out in someone's front yard by the road with a free sign on it. I grabbed it about a year ago. So I'm going to get some use out of that. Got some other various pieces here. Kind of a bummer, the last 2 days have been in the 40s, and now today it's 12 degrees and the wind's howling. But couldn't get out here the past 2 days because I had other commitments. Anyway, I'm going to get busy. Look at that. Nasty old bat. I don't know where he came from. Seems like it happens every couple of years. Get one in my shop in the winter. Aren't you a cutie? Alright, I spared you the anguish of watching me trying to mark this whole thing out. I'm not actually sure 3 inches on each side is going to be enough for as tall as those tires are, but I'll go ahead and cut it out, tack it together, and give it a test fit and see. This is 1/4 inch thick. I'll get one side and the bottom of the axle cut out of this piece of angle iron. And then I got another piece of 1/4 inch steel over there. I'll make the other side, and then I'll fill in the top piece with this 3/16. Reason I decided to make a new one, because adding 3 inches to it is going to put a lot of leverage on it, no matter what. So I decided I was probably better off just making one from scratch with thicker metal, and it's going to add some weight, sure, but it's probably not any worse than what some tractors are running around with cast iron front axles. So I spared you the boredom of watching me cut and grind stuff out, but I'll explain what I've done. Plus I just wanted to get stuff done without messing around with the camera. Got the piece cut out of the angle iron here. I put this on the second chunk of angle iron, traced it out, cut it out, clamped them together, and then ground them down to where they're both shaped pretty much the exact same. Drilled the center pivot hole. Ooh, those are still hot. And then these two blocks will run on the inside of it. And as a nice bonus, they will provide the perfect amount of spacing to weld it all together. I've already trial fitted it. What I'll do, I'll clamp that down with a bolt, weld it up to that side, do the same thing, this block to that side, put the two halves together, and I should be able to reach in there with the welder and just burn the two blocks together on the top. Yeah, then clamp it all together. I should be able to weld the bottom, and then I'll cut out the pieces to fill in the top. I'm out of time for today. Gotta go inside and get ready for work. Ooh, hot, hot. Yeah, I'm not sure that 3 inches on each side is going to be wide enough, like I already mentioned. But if it's not wide enough, I feel pretty good about, instead of starting over from scratch, because this is 1/4 inch steel, it should be plenty strong enough to just go cutting and splicing more into it. Whereas that original axle, it was pretty thin and had a lot of weird shape to it. So yeah, I'll be taking these knuckle pivots off and welding them onto there. That'll be the only thing I'm reusing from the original front axle. All right, back at it again a couple days later. I've got the beam all tacked together. I salvaged the pivots, knuckle pivots off of the old axle, have them tacked on. I was smart enough to measure the kingpin inclination of them, and I have them set on this particular axle. It was floating around 11, 12 degrees of kingpin inclination. I got them pretty well matched up to that. I'm going to go ahead and give it a test fit. Looks a lot better with it being wider. They damn near match front to rear. Just a touch wider on the front. The steering, I don't know. Obviously, yeah, it's a lot better what it'll do. I am almost thinking I want to add a couple more inches though. That's why I don't have it completely welded up yet. I could actually, obviously this one has no limit to the amount it'll turn. Other than, yeah, almost yeah, I don't know if that's going to be enough or not. I mean, normally it wouldn't. It's because it's such a long wheelbase rig. I'd like to have, from back here it doesn't really look like all that much steering still. So I don't know, I'm going to give it some more thought. My heart's not really into fabricating today. I had something bad personally happen to me, so I just kind of made myself get out here. I'm just gonna call it quits for today and think about this. As you can see, I've added another 2 inches to this side, just as a trial. The extra width doesn't look bad, I mean, compared to this. I don't know. I think I can live with the extra width. When you consider how long the wheelbase on this is going to be, a little extra width would probably help get it looking back in proportion a little bit. But let's see how the steering goes. I haven't tried this yet. Wow, that's a lot. That is a lot compared to... Actually, looking at it from the front, it doesn't look like there's any real difference. Tell you, yeah, it won't stay there on its own. Even still, it doesn't look like there's much, if any, difference looking at it from the side. If I can get back a little further. Let's take a look from the rear. No, not much of a difference that I'm seeing. Looks like I'm gonna have to do a little more thinking on this. Yeah, it's a couple days later. Finally managed to get out here. It's a nice day out. I think it's about 40 degrees. Got the top of the beam boxed in, letting it cool off. I'll get back to work on it. I'm back at it again today. There is the widened out axle, mocked in place again. Today what I'm going to try to do is work on the steering that I can up here at the front axle. Got the pivot there put in, and what I'm going to try to do is build the tie rods. And years ago at a swap meet I bought a whole big basket of these racing shocks, and I'm going to try to salvage these Heim ends off of them to do my tie rods with. Well, things are never easy, are they? Not the way I do it. Why do I have to make things so damn complicated? Okay, so with these ends that I'm taking off of the shock, they will not fit the original, I don't know what you'd call it, the steering plate, because they're too large in diameter. So, see there, if I try bolting them up that way, they will interfere with each other. So I'm cutting out another plate. I will cut this off right there, cut this all out, and weld it on right there. Also, I do need to make my steering arms to put on there. I got started a little bit on that, but then I had to fix one of my grinders too. Like I said, why can't I just make things simply? I always have to go full tilt and modify everything. Alright, maybe this will illustrate it better. That's how it is now. I will cut it off across there and weld this onto it right there. As you can see, the bolt holes are spaced further out to allow for the larger diameter of what will be my tie rod ends. Everything is clearing fairly nice. That's hitting there, but that shouldn't. Alright, I think I'll pull it back off and weld it up. Alright, if you remember a while back when I was working on the actual steering, not the tie rod steering, but the steering at the gear, and I told you I was excited about finding this sleeve. Here's why. Because this what I've done is I've cut these little slivers out to use as a misalignment spacer. I've got one under this, but not under this. If I ran it these ends just like this, oh, that's not even tight, but yeah, they basically wouldn't do anything. Now with this one, that little spacer in here, it gives the rod end room to do what it needs to do. I'm concerned now that I might have got these too close together. Let's see. I might just have to live with it. Oh. They get real close, but they don't bind with each other. That's why I was excited to get this thing, so I could cut some little spacers out of it. Hee hee! Sometimes things do work out for me. So once I get this whole steering together, I may have to cut out a thicker spacer to go in there, depending on, because these will still bind up, as the camera's probably picking up, but that might be enough. If not, yeah, I'll have to maybe double up on the thickness of that spacer. Well folks, I really wanted to get all the tie rods finished up and included in this video, but time just was not on my side. And besides that, I felt like this video was getting long enough as it is. Rest assured it will be in the next one. There will be a next one. I'd like to thank everybody that offered their condolences on the passing of Steve. As you can see by the picture I've got posted up right now, I gave him a Viking send-off and we cremated his body at home. I do have some additional footage of Steve that might show up in some potential future videos. So thanks again. I will be keeping him in the intro for a while anyway, because yeah, I won't be forgetting about him, and neither will you, whether you like it or not.